Hey everyone, this is FaZe and welcome to my channel. If you've been subscribed to me for a while, then you probably know that I'm a huge fan of the iPad, specifically the iPad Pro, and I've done a full review on the new M4 iPad Pro with the OLED display. So if you want to check that review out, you can click the link above or in the description below. The new M4 iPad Pro has actually replaced my MacBook, but I also wanted to check out its younger brother, the new iPad Air with the M2 chip. So I've been using the new iPad Air with its M2 chip for quite a few weeks now, and today I'm here to give you my thoughts. So the first thing I want to talk about is the design. Now, the design of the iPad Air hasn't really changed much. It looks pretty much identical to the previous iPad Air models. It's that same squared off boxy design that we all have come to love with the new iPad Air and the iPad Pro. You've got the 4 speaker grills, you've got the single camera in the back, and of course you've got Touch ID on the top as well. It's a beautiful design, and hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it, right? However, there are two things that are different this year that I want to talk about. For the first time ever, you don't have to go for an iPad Pro and pay the extra price just if you want the larger screen. Apple is now offering an iPad Air with a 13-inch display, and I love it because I also have the iPad Air here in the 11-inch display, and I think this is a very, very portable form factor, and I think a lot of people really like and enjoy this 11-inch screen size. It's great for people who want to just casually surf the web, browse through social media, check and send some emails here and there, and reading ebooks. I think this is a great size. But for those who kind of want to replace their laptop with the iPad, I think the 13-inch screen is fantastic because it's great to do, split screen stuff. Everything's just bigger. It's much more easier on the eye when you're reading documents and emails. So I think the larger screen device was something that should have always been offered in the iPad Air, but I'm glad finally Apple is introducing it. Now, speaking of introducing something that should have already been offered from the beginning, that is the new front-facing camera now in the landscape position. Because I think Apple has realized that more and more people are using these iPads, specifically the larger ones, in landscape mode, and they're doing FaceTime calls, Zoom calls, and it only makes sense to have the front-facing camera in the center. So I'm glad that the new FaceTime camera is in the center of the iPad. So those are the two changes you're going to see on the new iPad Air. Now, one interesting about the iPad Air that I can't really kind of understand is that it's called iPad Air. And usually whenever Apple calls their device an Air device, be it an iPad or a MacBook, it always means that it's the thinnest and lightest form factor. But with the new iPad Pro, it's actually thinner and lighter than the iPad Air. So it's kind of weird that we're calling this an iPad Air when the Pro is actually thinner and lighter than this. Now, going back to the display for a second, this is the same liquid retina display that you will find on previous iPad Airs. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I am disappointed that they did not add the 120 hertz ProMotion technology into this display. When you get used to the 120 hertz ProMotion display, it's almost like the display feels slower, or it feels like it's just lagging behind. But once again, that is a Pro feature. So I guess I shouldn't be asking for something like that to be on an Air. I feel like an average user will not necessarily know the difference between a 120 hertz display or a 60 hertz display. But once you do get used to the 120 hertz display like I have, you can really feel a difference. Now, aside from the new size offering with the 13-inch model and a landscape 12 megapixel ultra wide front camera, the other big change to this new iPad Air is the M2 chip. The previous model had the M1 chip, and to be honest, you are not going to find a difference at all with the M2 chip. So the previous M1 chip had an 8-core CPU, and this M2 also has an 8-core CPU. The previous M1 had an 8-core GPU, and this has a 9-core GPU. The previous one was a 16-core neural engine. This is also a 16-core neural engine. So for that 1 core extra for the GPU, you are not going to find a difference at all. So if you are trying to upgrade to an iPad Air from the previous iPad Air, and it's solely because you think the M2 is going to be way more faster and efficient, it's not. You're not going to find a difference. I was doing some testings with videos that I was editing on this and just doing casual gaming and stuff like that. You are not going to find a difference at all. And that's kind of what I hate talking about the iPad sometimes, be it the Air or the Pro. They keep getting these faster chips, but you're not always going to find a difference with it because for most people, what they're using this for, it does the job and it does it really, really well. If anything, I still feel that the M2 chip is overkill for a device like this. In most of my reviews when it comes to iPads, I don't even spend a lot of time talking about the performance or the chip because performance has never been an issue with any of the iPads. Now, one difference that they've added is with the storage. Before, the iPad Airs would always start with 64 gigabytes of storage, which I feel like is a huge disappointment in today's day and age. Storing pictures and files and movies and stuff is taking up more storage now than ever before. So 64 gigabytes was a huge disappointment. So now for the first time ever, if you go for an iPad Air, it now starts at 128 gigabytes. So I'm very happy that Apple is now starting the base storage at 128 gigabytes. Now, the iPad Air's display is bright, but it is not as bright as the iPad Pro. The iPad Air's brightness is at 600 nits max, though I do wish that they made it as bright as the iPad Pro. That would have been really neat. Now, lastly, I want to talk about accessories. The new iPad Air and the new iPad Pro both are compatible with the new Apple Pencil Pro. It's not compatible with the second generation Apple Pencil. So that's kind of strange. So that's what Apple is wanting you to do. They want you to use the Apple Pencil Pro, not the second generation Apple Pencil. It doesn't even work with that. But when it comes to the keyboard, that's where things get a little interesting because Apple has introduced an all-new Magic Keyboard with an aluminum surface, a larger glass trackpad, function keys, and it's so much better than the previous Magic Keyboard, but you can't use it with the new iPad Air. It only works with the iPad Pro. So that's kind of weird because when it comes to the Apple Pencil, they want you to use the Pro Apple Pencil, but when it comes to the Magic Keyboard, you have to use the standard Magic Keyboard. I really wish that they made the new Magic Keyboard compatible with the iPad Air because trust me, this new Magic Keyboard is absolutely amazing. But at the same time, you know, if you already owned one of these previous Magic Keyboards, it will work, you know, so you don't have to go out and buy a new one unless you buy the 13-inch device because then you will have to buy the bigger Magic Keyboard. But if you have the previous 11-inch iPad Air and you got a Magic Keyboard with that, it'll work just fine. So I guess that is a good thing in some way. Now, here's the thing. After using this new iPad Air for quite a few weeks now, I actually really, really like it. Like, I think, you know, for me, the iPad has replaced the MacBook, the iPad Pro at least. And I didn't really think I'd like the iPad Air as much as I actually enjoyed using this. It's quite wonderful. And I feel like for most people who are trying to replace their computer with an iPad, or for the individuals who want an iPad to work side by side with their MacBook, I think this is quite a wonderful device. So I do wish that it was a little brighter and it had that 120 hertz screen. But other than that, I mean, it works perfectly fine because sure, it's not as fast as the M4, but it doesn't need to be that fast. If this iPad Air renders a video 5 seconds slower than the M4 iPad Pro, that is not a big deal at all. And I have friends who are, you know, creative artists and graphic designers, and they enjoyed using this iPad Air as much as the M4 iPad Pro. Of course, like I said, it would be nice if this had some of the Pro features, but then again, that's for the pros, right? For the average consumer, I think this is fantastic. And I think a lot of people are really, really going to enjoy this. And I think the price point makes it wonderful because if you want the 11-inch model of this iPad Air, it starts at $599. And if you want the one with the 13-inch display, that starts at $799. Whereas the iPad Pro with the 11-inch starts at $999. And if you want the 13-inch one, that's $1299. So the Pro iPads are quite expensive. But when I look at this, I feel like it's got everything that you would want to do on an iPad. So, and I think for most people, this is the iPad to get. Now, once again, I do a lot of video editing. I do graphic design, and I really use my iPad Pro as a full-blown computer/Mac replacement. So the iPad Pro makes sense for me in the work that I do. But for most people who are trying to use this for email and browsing the web, reading ebooks, reading documents, doing some slide content creation here and there, and doing some work on here, I think this is great. But at the end of the day, I really want to know your thoughts. What do you think of the new iPad Air with the M2 chip? Do you think it's actually a better purchase than the iPad Pro? If so, let me know by commenting below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, because I will do a full side-by-side comparison between the new M2 iPad Air and the M4 iPad Pro. So subscribe to my channel, stay tuned for more content on iPads and my personal workflow with iPads in general, and I'll see you next time.